Good morning. My name is Bill Chamberlain, and I lead the sales and marketing teams here at Verrex. For those of you that are new to Verrex, we are a leader in providing audiovisual solutions for the modern workplace. For over 70 years, we have helped organizations leverage ever-changing business communication solutions to solve problems and grow. With our global presence, Verrex is proud to help organizations leverage these solutions to meet an entirely new set of business challenges and implement enhanced user experiences. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us in today's webinar. That is the first in a three-part series that will take us on a journey through the hybrid workplace. As a large number of businesses continue to move forward with reopening their offices, Verrex has created this series and assembled a team of knowledge experts to educate us and discuss these solutions. These experts include people from our own team here at Verrex, from our manufacturing partners, and finally from representatives of the businesses themselves. Today, our Verrex team will be focusing on enhancing the office experience. First, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Shore. Jonathan has worked with multinational organizations for over 20 years in evaluating and implementing their workplace strategies. Jonathan is the go-to resource for most of our architectural and program management partners in working these strategies. Welcome, Jonathan.
Morning, Bill. Glad to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Akin Adewale. Akin is our senior design engineer based out of our corporate headquarters and has spent 24 years in networking and audiovisual solution. His experience working with the AV trifecta, including consulting, manufacturing, and integration, has given him a unique perspective to solutions while working with our largest enterprise clients. Welcome, Akin. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Bill. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And last, I would like to welcome Ben Dandola Grubb, our Vice President of Engineering Services. Ben continues to not only drive best practice solutions, but more importantly, to help us all understand the dynamic technology plays in implementing these successful business solutions. This three-part series was developed by Ben as a way to educate both our partners and our clients. Thanks, Ben.
Good morning. Thank you, Bill.
All right, before we start, I want to cover a few quick administrative details. First, we're recording today's session and make a replay available following. You'll be able to find this recording as well as our previous webinars, technology solutions, and general tips and tricks videos on our Verrex YouTube channel. Please subscribe to be notified as we continue to release new content. Additionally, we'll be having a Q&A period at the end of the webinar. Please be sure to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in any questions. And now I'll turn it over to our expert team. Ben, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Bill. So as we get started here, we're going to start off with our agenda. We have a lot to pack in as we have the next hour together here. We're going to start off with a recap of a similar webinar that we delivered back in June of 2020 as the pandemic was just kicking off, as we were all expecting technologies to evolve and to help us to see and envision what the workplace might look like in the future. Then we're going to talk about the video conferencing platform choice, what to think about when you're tackling these conversations. Then we're going to look at the enhancing the user experience. How do we attract people to come back to the office? What makes working from the office better than working from home? And then we're going to also get into the conversation about how can we enhance the life of the AV or IT service manager and support staff, either on-site or providing remote management for your technology systems. So as we jump right in here, let's start off with our recap from last year. As I mentioned, this was a recap of June 2020. We were seeing change coming, but we weren't exactly sure what it was going to look like as we get into the future in terms of bringing people back to the office. Jonathan, let's start with you. What emerging technology trends from a year ago do you see that are still relevant today?
Well, the first part, temperature check, we've seen that implemented across the board in security areas, in lounges where people are certainly walking into the office. We don't feel like people are going to remove those systems. They'll probably keep them in place, but I don't feel like it's going to be largely expanded in that respect. Occupancy is still an important feature of the workplace. A lot has changed, obviously, since our last webinar in June. But as people return to work, every company has developed their own standard on how they're going to bring people back, whether it's on a part-time basis, whether it's on a staggered daily basis, and there's still going to be some element of occupancy restrictions. But we have to be agile in how we allow people to book rooms and allow those booking systems to change as those occupancy standards change. So if one day everything is 50% capacity in conference rooms, and then when you do a search for conference rooms, you'll get the results that meet your needs. And then the next day when the policy changes to 75%, those systems can be updated accordingly. So occupancy is still absolutely relevant moving forward.
That sounds good. So, Akin, what have you seen regarding no-touch solutions? There was a number of developments over the past year and solutions that I've seen come out. What are your thoughts?
I think no touch is still relevant. It's just not as alarming as it was maybe a year ago. There's definitely been a little bit of a shift, or there's basically a better understanding of touch when it comes to the pandemic and coronavirus and so forth. That touch isn't the primary transmitter for infection. It really comes down to making sure that you're wearing a mask and that you're socially distanced. And I think we've all gotten really used to washing our hands, wiping things down. So if nothing else, we all have there's a heightened sense of cleanliness and just making sure that devices that we're touching are being wiped down properly. That said, that there definitely were some technological advances over the course of the past year that I think will have staying power. In terms of us being able to utilize our own devices for as a control interface for these different systems, whether it's our laptop or whether it's our phones or tablets. The no touch solutions that have been developed over the course of the last year, I think are definitely still going to be relevant.
So we're not seeing it as a health and safety issue. It's about making your life better. If you choose to have that no-touch solution, it's enhancing your experience in the conference room. And I'll just add that we've used some of the QR code-based no-touch solution from the major control manufacturers, and they have their pluses and minuses. And the ideal no-touch solution when it comes to walking into a room, scanning a QR code, and now I have the full user interface on my own device, whether it's my phone or my tablet, it'll be best. The experience will be best when you build it from the ground up. So upgrading rooms to have QR codes is certainly possible, but the user interface is going to be different. Or what had been a 10-inch touch panel is squished down to your 6-inch phone screen, so the buttons are going to be smaller. It all works, but we need to think about it together as we are tackling the no-touch solutions when it comes up. But have you seen actual demand from clients, Akin?
For the no touch solutions, to be quite honest, not as much. I think oftentimes there's still going to be a touch panel that's actually being specified and put into an actual conference space. And I think a lot of the different opportunities that we've seen still are having touch panels put on the table or on the wall for that matter. So again, I think it's more of an option that has been articulated over the course of the past year, that people now know they have this as an option. And I think there's also been some improvements in terms of how it's being done as well. So I think really it's just about giving people options. You can still have the touch panel on the table, but if you're really more concerned about no touch, then you do have those interfaces as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's other aspects of this in regards to voice activated control, which is emerging and happening. And also shareable technology, lavalier microphones, assisted listening, neck loops. How can we utilize our personal device, with crowd mics and things of that nature, as opposed to using that shareable technology. So no touch really expands into a lot of different areas, and that's a lot of things that we need to consider.
Yep. And so, Jonathan, what about digital signage? Have there been changes in that realm in the past 12 months?
I wouldn't say changes. The messaging is the actual messaging and content is certainly an aspect that's changed. But I believe that digital signage is more important than ever to be able to deliver the message of the organization as far as policies in relation to COVID and pandemic and whatever else might be changing. So the ability to be agile and not just have sort of static signage anymore that's just showing the sort of same gallery over and over again. Dynamic digital signage, it's easily changed, is definitely something that we're seeing more of, and it should be expanded more and more.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys. So we're going to move right in here and talking about the video conferencing platform choice. So Jonathan, it seems that at least every conversation that I'm in with a client, that's the starting point, platform choice. Why is this important?
Wow, Ben, I tell you, I'm having this conversation probably 3 times a week with customers, and some of the same customers over and over again. What is a platform? Let's just make sure everyone's aware. A platform is the type of video conference collaboration software that you're going to be using. Obviously, we can see the list there, and we're all probably familiar with one or more of them, and we've all probably used one or more of them. So the question becomes, what is going to be the platform that gets rolled out within an organization. Before COVID, companies had some platforms and they might have had mixtures, or maybe they just had video conferencing in their large rooms. And then at home, people just relied on some sort of UC platform to do instant messaging. Or maybe most people were just using telephone calls. Once the pandemic hit and everybody was doing video, everybody jumped on board to whatever platform was out there. Some people created their own Zoom accounts. So then now you were sort of left with these organizations that are cross-pollinated with various different platforms, everybody using something different. So it's really important that an organization looks at what they've used in the past, looks at their environment, and tries to pick something that's going to work within their environment. That's kind of discussions we've been having. The secondary discussions as far as the room peripherals, displays, microphone choices, ceiling, table. That's secondary. That's a second conversation, and that has to happen regardless of what platform they pick. We know we need to put a TV in the room. We know we need some sort of camera or microphone. But the first discussion needs to happen is, what path are we going to go down?
And Akeen, what's your experience been with clients? Does anyone pick a single platform nowadays?
I have seen some clients most recently choosing, some fairly large clients actually choosing a single platform, and it's been it's been an interesting challenge to move away from the current platform that they're using and moving more to a soft conferencing system. There's a lot of demo testing that we do to try to make sure that there's the proper interoperability between all these different devices and so forth. But definitely there are some clients who are settling on one particular platform, and it probably has primarily to do with the fact that they don't want to manage multiple platforms. For some maybe smaller to medium-sized companies, having multiple platforms may be okay. But if you have like a very large enterprise, being able to move to just one particular platform and having essentially one dashboard or one type of device that you have to maintain or keep track of, as well as in terms of people interfacing and using it, everybody's learning the same interface, at the same time. I mean, Zoom is one of the biggest examples of that. Over the course of the past year, everybody's had a crash course in Zoom. So you do see some people like moving towards Zoom because all their users know how to use Zoom now. So to answer your question, yeah, I have seen some people standardize on just a single platform.
So you brought up some good points. You just said that I know how to use Zoom. Yes, I do, but that's on my laptop. So when I come into the conference room, what if there's a Zoom room or a Teams room, a room system? Jonathan, what is a room system?
A room system, good question. So a room system is an extension of that software platform, but it's designed to be in a room environment. And so all the major platforms between Zoom and Teams and WebEx have their room version system. And they provide some enhancements. They provide the ability to walk in without any device, without anything on a laptop or a phone, and being able to start a meeting or join a meeting or schedule a meeting right from that room system. They offer other types of features, things like proximity, of being able to join a call wirelessly, share your content wirelessly, start a call without even having to schedule something, just by using your own calendar. And so room systems are great in that they adopt that desktop client into a room environment. And so the learning curve is minimal. People are already used to using it. Now, granted, the interface is slightly different for a room system, but it's still very consistent. It still allows that user adoption to happen, and it's a great feature that they've brought into the world of conferencing, and it allows us to deploy a lot more systems in a lot more spaces.
One of the biggest concerns that we've had over time when there are multiple platforms in use is interoperability. And so we started off with, okay, you have to buy your CVI license, their Cloud Video Interop license, to be able to get your Cisco to join your Zoom call, for your Cisco to join your Teams call, and so forth. But we are converging and working towards this world where the platforms can join one another. One of the recent examples, and this is honestly from months ago, but a Zoom room can join a Microsoft Teams call nowadays with no external license. Functionality is slightly reduced, but you can do it, and that's a big advantage. Akeen, let's go to the next topic here. BYOD. What does that mean?
So BYOD, I think most of us probably know what that means by now. Bring your own device. And that's essentially what we've all been doing over the course of the past year. We've been using our own devices for joining conferencing calls, whether it's been via Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, BlueJeans, what have you. And we've been actually designing BYOD systems for quite some time, even before the pandemic happened. What's interesting is that I think over the course of the last year, and it was something that was actually starting to happen, even kind of moving into the pandemic. So I think that a lot of these manufacturers had some foresight in terms of bringing those two together, room systems and BYOD. So a lot of the different systems that we design now actually have a BYOD option or that functionality built in. Because the fact of the matter is that people are coming back to work, you know, they're used to utilizing their systems a particular way, they're using their laptops in a particular way, and we don't want to take away that functionality. So you definitely want to give people the option of, you know, taking advantage of some of the benefits that Jonathan was describing with room systems, but at the same time understanding that they have a comfortability with devices that they're used to and finding a, you know, a comfortable mix between the two.
So in one sense, you're kind of saying that I can have everything. I can build my Microsoft Teams room, and then I could still walk in with my laptop, connect my HDMI and a USB cable, and now everything in that room is coming back to my laptop, and I can run any
And you
call.
can have whatever you want. You can have it all platforms, all devices.
And it's probably also worth mentioning that there's a couple software options that you can run on a dedicated PC in a space that gives you the ability to have one touch join from Calendar, which we'll talk about in a little bit and what that really means, across platforms. You know, some of these softwares will support well over 30 platforms. I didn't even realize there are 30 platforms, but there are. And you can walk into a room, have a little touch panel that says, okay, 11 a.m. Zoom call, click. I am in that call now. And that's a little bit different than a room system, but it is a type of room system. It's in between a Zoom room and a BYOD that for some clients, it presents the best of both worlds. So let's talk about enhancing the user experience here. The goals that we're going to go for are simplicity, ease of use. You walk into a space and what you're supposed to do to get everything running should be absolutely intuitive. So Akin, what are some of the first steps that can enable a great user experience?
Well, some of the things, you know, that can enable a great user experience, first and foremost, is just obviously the technology within the room. You know, VC platforms are fairly inexpensive. They're all-in-one systems, you know, in terms of being able to have a piece of hardware that covers your audio and it covers your microphone, it covers your content share, it covers your just being able to even just present into the room itself. You know, being able to have the technology, the proper technology in the room is a first and foremost thing that's going to really kind of make sure that the user experience is one that's better than one that they might have with them just with their own BYOD device. The other thing is in terms of how they're actually able to actually get into those meetings and actually book those meetings in the first place. So we've been, you know, doing this for quite some time, you know, as an enterprise where you'll invite a resource or invite a room, you know, and it'll have its own separate calendar, you know, so everybody knows that that particular resource has been, you know, reserved. But, you know, with a lot of these systems that we're putting in now also have the additional intelligence to read that calendar and set the room up accordingly. So when you walk into that room now, you basically are able to just kind of click to join and everything is up and running for you. So it knows you're coming, you know, and when you get in there, you can just get started. You don't have to worry about setting up the room for the meeting and spending the first 5 to 10 minutes trying to make sure everybody can hear you or see you or what have you. So
you're talking about walking into a room, you go to the user interface, in most cases the touch panel, and there's a button that says join or start.
But I think it's, you know, I think it's important to note that we want to deliver a consistent user experience regardless of room type. So too often we see that like the small video rooms get like the TV remote, and then the medium-sized rooms get an iPad, and then the large-sized rooms get like a big touch panel. And what does that do? That forces the end user to have to learn multiple platforms, have different user experiences regardless of where they're walking into. We want to be able to train people on one user experience, one user interface. So regardless of the room type, whether it's a simple huddle room, which is a unified all-in-one soundbar, to just a typical conference room, to a complex multi-purpose space, the user experience, the user interface needs to be the same so that a user can come into a room and start a meeting. And if it's a very complex space, still be able to work it and you know, still be able to get to access to all the basic features that they need. And then if there's some type of higher level meeting, then they can have an AV tech come in. But it's important that once the VC goes into every space, we deliver a consistent user experience in every space.
I personally have been really excited over the past year or two about calendar integration, which enables this one-touch join experience. But we absolutely also have clients who say, I am never going to be tying a room resource calendar to every single one of my conference rooms. And Jonathan, what options does that type of client have in front of them to still have a user experience that's simple?
Yeah, we get that. There's a several vertical markets within our industry that won't do that. It's either booked through an admin or it's booked ad hoc basis, and that's where room systems are great, because room systems have meet now, where you come in, press the button, and you're meeting now, and then you can invite people right from the panel. You can send somebody the access code. There's also the proximity that we mentioned before, where you can walk in with your laptop and whatever desk client you're using and start the meeting using your own calendar. So it's more ad hoc in that way, but it still allows you to use all the benefits of the room system in that way. So absolutely, the days of dialing IP addresses and then dialing passcodes and dialing security, where it literally takes, over 5 minutes just to join the call, those days are gone. We've moved past it. We need to leverage the technology for what it provides.
And if you walk into a room system that's not previously booked and you're going to have an ad hoc meeting, all three, in my mind, three major platforms, Zoom, Cisco, and Microsoft Teams, have a join from a room button or a find a room button that really allows you to do this simply from your laptop or your phone. It works both ways and pretty well.
And just for everyone to keep in mind, one-touch join is typically based around a room system. If it's a pure BYOD environment, it is not one-touch join.
It just means you're going to connect your cable to the system from your laptop, and then you join the call on your laptop just as you would have done if you're working from the kitchen table at home.
Yep.
So there's arguments there to be made from, I know how to do it on my laptop, so I'm going to be used to that, and that's what I want to do. And that's okay. So moving on, continuing with our enhancing the user experience here, some of the simple things we can do are a variety of different types of automations. The room could either be always on from maybe within business hours, or there could be an occupancy sensor. When I walk into that room, the display turns on. And if it's a BYOD system, maybe there's a splash screen on that display. It says, this is how you use this space. Connect your cable here. You'll find it in the drawer in the table, and then you can start your meetings. It can be very simple, even if you have the need to force users to connect wires if you have a BYOD only type of space. But Jonathan, I know that you are a proponent of different types of wired connectivity. Could you give us an explanation of what we need to think about if we do have wired connections?
Sure. It's funny, the little things that we get passionate about in this industry. And so one of the things that always kind of grabs me is a table box. It sounds silly, but all too many times I walk into a conference room, I'm sure we all have, and we look at the table and there's wires everywhere. The flap isn't quite closed because there's just wires stuffed inside there, or somebody was called in because an end user went to try to disconnect something or didn't have the cable available. We have to stop picking devices from a catalog that look pretty, because in the end, something that looks really nice in a catalog isn't necessarily going to be the best functional approach. We have to be very considerate about the technology we pick. And in my opinion, the technology has to support existing cables that are there already. No more jack plates that require external cables. It's either some sort of gravity fed system where you're pulling the cable out, plugging in your laptop, and then feeding it back down into the well. Or more sophisticated would be a retraction system where the cable pulls out, plugs in, and then you press the button and retracts back in. That way, the cable is always there. It's always ready to go, but it's not strawn all over the table and preventing the table box to close. One other consideration in regards to, just so we understand the difference between content sharing and call hosting. So content sharing is coming into a room and just sharing the presentation off your laptop, the way we're seeing your PowerPoint right now, where call hosting is coming in and plugging in so that your laptop is now driving the call. And they're two very different things, where a lot of the room platforms already have wireless content sharing built in. It's a very easy aspect to use. But as far as call hosting, there are several technologies out there that allow you to host a call on your laptop wirelessly. In my opinion, I prefer the reliability of the wired connection, but again, that gets back to making sure that you've picked the correct thing for your table.
So let's dive a little deeper into the wireless side of things here. Akeem, what's your experience with wireless content sharing?
So ideally, when you're joining a room system, you want to join it as quickly as possible. So for a lot of the room systems, that we're installing, there is a pairing code that will be on the screen that you'll type in, and then fairly instantaneously, you'll be able to start sharing whatever's on your device. I say that's ideal. I think there's also the familiarity aspect of it, which is people are used to sharing content directly from their own devices. And a lot of people will walk into a room, will join that call in that room, and if they need to share content, they'll share it from their actual laptop. Now, the problem with that is that, a double join, triple join, people are gonna have to mute their microphones, mute their speakers. So it does cause some issues, but that is another way that people can share into a call. Is just join the call and then share from your device in and of itself. The best mix of probably both is some options where you can actually share using a third party device where multiple people can join that device and share content, and not just necessarily have one screen, but you have up to say 4 or more screens that are be able to view simultaneously. And then you're sharing that entire unit into the call in and of itself. So there's a few different sharing options. Again, the primary one is being able to join in and just type in a pairing code, and you're pushing that content directly into the room system to avoid a lot of the feedback and echo that you would get from option number 2. And then again, like I said, the third one with being able to do multiple people sharing. But that last one doesn't require everybody to join a call, which is what's nice about that. Multiple people can share, but not everybody's on the call. Just the room itself is on the call.
Because those people are all on the same local Wi-Fi network and not all joining the call. That makes sense. So you mentioned pairing codes. Earlier, Jonathan mentioned proximity. I want to get in briefly about how proximity relates to this wireless content share when you have that functionality that makes it faster. So in these platforms, just Cisco and Zoom, they both kind of use that word proximity. You walk into a space, you open up your app on your laptop, your phone, and it finds the system automatically. You don't have to put in that pairing code. Now, if somebody steals your Zoom controller, it's not going to work so well, and you'll need that pairing code. But that proximity really is, without getting into too much detail, is a high-pitch frequency that allows the devices to find one another, and then they talk via Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's absolutely the easiest way to share content. I tell people that the wired connection for just content sharing is a backup, and that they should always use the platform they choose to share content. We're not talking about switching inputs on the television. We're not talking about doing anything like that. Even if we're not in a call, we're still sharing through that platform, and that will deliver, again, a consistent user experience and will raise up adoption.
Jonathan, the one thing we didn't maybe directly touch on yet is wireless BYOD, where I want to drive the call from my laptop, but I want to connect nothing to it.
It's exciting. I mean, we've seen it being used. We see multiple manufacturers have that product out there. I think it's coming along. I think there are a lot of other potential challenges in regards to the reliance on a customer network, the reliance on how well they put together their Wi-Fi network, certain aspects of quality of service. I think if you can deploy all those things, it's a great, clean solution. My opinion, if you're doing call hosting through your laptop, plug in for now.
And I've successfully done it both ways, and I absolutely agree with there's a lot of factors that could take away from that type of scenario. So let's talk about visual enhancements here. Jonathan, I'll stick with you for a minute. What are your recommendations nowadays of flat panels versus projectors, and also direct view LED? That's becoming more prevalent.
It is. I mean, it's the same conversation we've been having for years. What display makes the most sense for the room environment? Was it flat panel? Flat panels are obviously a lot more prevalent. The costs have come down. They become slimmer. They become brighter. They become higher resolution. Projectors are still a great alternative from an architectural standpoint, where you can't put a flat panel, or you really just need a larger image area. So there's still a cost savings when you look at projection. And then direct view LED, as the resolution has gone up and the cost is going down slowly but surely, we can get LED, direct view LED in a lot more spaces that can deliver a lot larger of an image area. But in the end, this is about ergonomics. We're trying to deliver as much video conferencing as we can in as many spaces as possible. So we want to pick the most appropriately sized display. We want to consider text readability. We want to consider where the display is going, because there's always a camera related to that. So again, making sure that the camera has good sight lines and that we're not oversizing the display, just in the same way we don't want to undersize it for text readability. A TV that's too big offers just as bad of an experience.
I definitely don't want to feel like I'm in the front row of the movie theater. I've never enjoyed that. But one of the reasons I do enjoy being in a meeting or a conferencing space when I'm taking a call is that it can be a much more immersive experience when I see you and you look life size. You know, the display is now large enough and you are large enough on that display that you're normal size to me and allows us to communicate more effectively in many instances.
And that's where like going with two displays in some instances can make more sense, because a two display scenario allows you not to have to share the screen between, you know, the Brady Bunch little tiles of everybody on video and the content. We can separate those and have one TV dedicated for the people and one TV dedicated for the content.
I was just going to just add to that, just having that larger display, this allows you to tune more into like nonverbal communications, just, in terms of people's expressions on their face. You can just read them better, particularly if you can see them better, so like a lot of the things we were talking about earlier in terms of the furniture, in terms of the lighting, like those things are all important factors in terms of those nonverbal communications, which is just as important what people actually say. So.
And one of the reasons why we're a big proponent of video conferencing in every space nowadays is that moving forward, it's going to be a hybrid approach. You will have people in a conference room together, but there will almost always be someone calling in either from home or from the road or Starbucks. There's going to be a variety of people joining from everywhere in the world. So Keen, let's touch on cameras for a few minutes. Framing and tracking, please define these for us first, but then also talk about how does this enhance the user experience?
So automatic camera framing is something we've all probably had a little bit of a taste of. I know that if you're like on some of these soft conferencing calls, you might see the camera actually kind of like tracking your face and trying to keep you on center. I know that, like, for instance, Pexip does that. If you're using their online, like their browser, like it'll actually move, to make sure that you're in frame. And there's a lot of the systems that we specify that have that sort of framing built in. The AI built in will actually look at the number of people that are in frame, and it will adjust to make sure that those people are in frame. So if it's one person, it'll zoom in on that one person. If it's 2 or 3 people, it'll make sure it zooms out enough to be able to pick up all 3 people or 4 people or 5 people, whatever you have that's actually in that space. With tracking, it's a little bit more advanced. With tracking, they're typically using a combination of AI and then also microphone arrays to determine where somebody is actually in the room. And that way the camera will actually follow you. So you don't have to have someone with, a camera controller using pan-tilt zoom to make sure that they're keeping you in frame as you get up and walk around the room. You'll see this in a lot of like higher education installations where the professor's at the front of the room and they're able to walk around freely, and the camera for remote participants is just keeping track of wherever they go. Sometimes they'll also wear like a dongle around their neck or like a necklace that will also help to keep track as well. And then as far as switching is concerned, that's kind of getting into the next level, which is almost like a live production where you may have multiple cameras that are picking up where a person is in the room. And you may even have some sort of, some sort of timing associated with when a camera switches from one to the next. So again, kind of getting away from having a dedicated person that's sitting in the room that's switching between cameras and using a pan-tilt zoom controller to try to keep track of the presenter. We're like looking at systems now that are actually able to do all of that automatically.
So they're fully automated camera solutions that are very scalable, all the way up from a simple camera bar and a huddle table that's framing to a tracking system in a lecture hall at the university level. And then also looking at the boardroom, we've deployed up to 7 cameras that do automatic tracking and switching based on active talker within that boardroom space. So it's very simple to use because it just does its thing, and it works out very well.
In the days before automatic panning and framing, what ended up happening? Nobody ever adjusted the camera. So if somebody just sat at the back of the room, they'd look tiny. They just looked at the end of a long table. and nobody ever bothered to do anything. So rather than telling people to pan in, they've changed it so that you don't have to do anything. And again, enhancing the user experience. Come in and you know you're going to be framed.
And part of this is about equity between the participants. If you have 6 people in a conference room, they're going to be smaller with a regular old camera compared to us on this webinar where we're individually framed. And so we're going to be appearing much larger. So if you have this active switching, every person on a call can have the same size image so that you have that equitable experience for all involved. So Jonathan, how about lighting and furniture? What do we need to think about there?
Well, we can't forget about lighting. You know, I don't care what technology you have. You know, if we deliver audiovisual in a room that has insufficient or too much lighting, you're just going to negatively affect the user experience. So it's important that if we're talking about large-scale deployments of video, that someone like a lighting designer is brought on board to help the architect, you know, picking the correct fixtures and understanding lighting levels at people's faces, as opposed to just picking a nice looking fixture out of a catalog. It's really important that the furniture supports the technology, the shape of the table, the connectivity within the table. These are all elements that are really going to help with the success or not success of the system deployment.
When you have your solid design team, when you're looking at cameras and you're looking at lighting, you're going to have a better experience when you're in the office as opposed to working from home. So it's important at the least for your higher level team members, but you want it across the board. You know, your C-level executives need to look good on camera. Otherwise, they'll be quite disappointed with the solutions that are delivered to them. So let's talk about audio here briefly for a minute. Akin, how can a great audio solution provide a great user experience?
Intelligibility to me is like absolutely number one. No matter how good you look on camera, no matter how good the lighting is, you know, no matter how good the presentation is, if I can't hear what you're saying, you know, clearly, then a call can start going downhill pretty quickly. And this is kind of like certainly a 101 for everybody who's in AV, but I think it's something that we've all kind of acquiesced to, you know, our laptops, you know, and our home-based systems, and just have been dealing with the oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes inadequacies of those options. Some of the things you're locked into one position. You know, you have to sit at your laptop. You know, if you're using the microphone that's built into your laptop, then you can't move away from it. Or even if you have an attached device like a USB speaker or microphone, you have to kind of be in close proximity in order for that to work. My laptop speakers are terrible. You know, I always use a separate, you know, microphone speaker. But if you're, you know, in a room environment, a lot of these things are going to actually be taken care of for you. You'll be able to, you know, have a much more engaging experience. If you're used to getting up and standing and walking around the room, and you talk with your hands, you know, you talk to the front of the room, you go to the back of the room, you know, audio room systems and ceiling microphones, arrays, and so forth that we typically install are going to be able to capture whatever you're saying very clearly and consistently, no matter where you are in that space. And likewise for the far end, when it comes to hearing what's coming back, oftentimes people are speaking at different microphone levels. And I found that, you know, when you're using a room-based system, the DSP takes care of all of that. You know, so if someone speaks very quietly, you know, it'll boost their voice up a bit. If someone speaks very loudly, it'll keep it at a nominal level. So intelligibility to me is number one, you know, in terms of any conference experience. I'd rather be on an excellent sounding audio only call than a subpar sounding video call.
When you break it down, great audio to me simply means you don't ever think about it. It just happens and you have your meeting.
Absolutely.
And it's, you know, it's being able to implement voice lift in large rooms so that you don't need to wear anything. You can talk and you can be heard in other parts of the room. Different aspects of social distancing. So if you're seated more apart, you can still be heard. So it's definitely an absolute must, you know, for a successful deployment.
And then Jonathan, what about telephony? Is that still an active conversation?
Well, let me hit the last one first, room acoustics. So room acoustics very much ties into the conversation about well-designed audio. Again, if you don't pay attention to the room acoustics, the audio system is going to fail. If it's an uncomfortable room to just sit in and talk for a couple of hours without technology, then how do we think it's going to sound with technology? So we have to look at form and function. We have to look at bringing in the right team members to make sure that we're not hearing noises from the room next door. We're not hearing foot taps. There's not too much air conditioning noise. All these things affect the user experience. And just like Akeem said, it's most important. You'd rather spend time in an audio only call that sounds great. And with the right room acoustics, we can deliver that every time. To answer your question about telephony, yeah, we still need telephone calls. We still have to make a telephone call. You know, we're talking about video platforms. We're talking about video conferencing. Telephone is still around and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So it needs to be considered. How are you going to make a telephone with these room-based systems? How are you going to make a telephone call with a BYOD environment? Are you going to plug in your laptop and use the soft, phone feature from your laptop software? Or can you register the room system as a SIP endpoint so you can make telephone calls? Either way, telephony can't be ignored. It still needs to be a part of the discussion. It still needs to be something that gets implemented in these rooms, and it has to be easy. In the same way from your cell phone, you just dial the area code and the number. It needs to be just as easy from the conference room.
That all makes sense. So bringing us along here, let's talk for just a few minutes since we're wrapping up on our content time. Service and support enhancements. So what we mean is, how can we deliver a better experience for the AV and the IT managers in terms of their support of devices at an individual level, but also at a corporate enterprise level? So Akeem, now that we have video conferencing in every single space, we need to think about device management. Why is this critical?
Well, there's a few different areas, I think, to consider with device management, just like from a utilitarian standpoint, having, a couple of people on staff who are going into multiple rooms and multiple spaces, trying to do firmware updates, that can be a week-long or 2-week-long task, depending upon how big your systems are and how far apart and wide they are. But a lot of these device management systems or asset management systems, you're able to do that from a single dashboard and save, 90% or more of that time that you would have people or, going out and actually upgrading and firmware, individually on individual devices. That's the first thing. The second thing is from a monitoring standpoint, you're able to do a lot of, troubleshooting in advance. Before something becomes a problem, you're getting updates from different devices, whether it's via SMS or you're getting, a trap sent to you, via email. You're able to, get into those spaces and make some adjustments, make some updates. If your device is looking like it's, going to fail, you can actually get in there before the actual meeting happens to do something about it. And then if something actually does happen, while someone is actually in a meeting, there are these real-time, dashboards that you can use to actually go in and try to help, the user experience along for a call that may actually be live. And then the last thing I would say is from like an operations standpoint, you're able to monitor things like room utilization. How many times has a codec been fired up during the course of a day? And how many people are actually in a room that may be set up for 12 people, but you always only have 2 or 3 people who are in that space. That's a signal to management that, maybe there's a better way to utilize that resource. And you may need to think about either a different layout or maybe enhancing the technology within that room so that, it can become more attractive for more users. So those are some of the things that, device management really, really takes into consideration.
So I think traditionally that was a back-end conversation, but Jonathan, I am now of the opinion that device management has to be a front-end conversation. It's a critical aspect here. So you're a proponent of simplification. How do we extend this to the device management and also hardware selection?
Absolutely. I mean, it's important that your hardware management solution is agnostic, manufacturer agnostic, that we're able to get the same type of information as far as whatever you're looking for. If the system is online, if it's powered up, if it's ready to go, if there's video present, being able to remotely reboot devices as needed, whether that's through the device itself or potentially IP controllable power strips, but delivering a unified platform that you can really monitor your devices. Because a lot of the discussions we're having with our customers are expanding video in every space, but they're not hiring new staff necessarily, so they have to make do with what they have. and suddenly they've just been given a larger workload. And then to that end, VC call and support management is typically a different platform. It's monitoring your video conferencing platform. It's understanding the video calls as they happen, understanding the bandwidth requirements, the performance of the calls. Do you need to recommend that people plug in their laptop wired? You can see how people perform from their home office if their internet isn't working well. And just from a licensing perspective, maybe they purchased a certain amount of concurrent licenses and then realize that they need to purchase more. So again, it's important that we're able to decentralize management, bring it to the different people within the organization, and allow them to be the support that they need to be.
It seems this is a very important conversation that would require some more detail. So maybe we should table this and come back to it in the future, maybe even a webinar in our future planning here. So let's do a quick summary. Today, we talked about our video conferencing platform choices and the thought process there of what goes into it. We talked about enhancements to the user experience because we want it to be simple, easy, intuitive, and then also the technologies that are along for the ride that enable that experience to be simple. And then obviously we just now talked about the AV and IT manager and enabling them to manage all of their devices, including remotely opening a firmware. You shouldn't have to connect to one box or thousands of boxes one at a time. Bill, I'd like to hand things back over to you here to talk about Q&A, see if there's any questions that we can answer.
Great, thanks, Ben. Being mindful of everyone's time, I'm going to jump right into what we have received in the chat and the Q&A. For anybody that has submitted something that we don't get to today, we'll follow up with you directly. First question, I believe it came in from a managing consulting firm that we support, and I think this may tie into the camera framing you were discussing earlier. Question is, I am in charge of customer experience in my company. Single most asked question is, now that my users are used to Zoom laptop experiences where each person gets an equal real estate on the screen, how can you help me recreate the same experience in a hybrid work environment, especially for those who will join from room systems?
That's a great question. And I think that's one of the things that Ben was alluding to before in regards to picking the correct camera. So picking the right camera solution in a room that will allow the users to basically grow to be the same size as the people who are remote is important. So what is that? That could be multiple cameras, that could be an auto tracking camera, but it's absolutely important. Auto framing cameras, they don't really do that because they're just gonna frame 4 people in a call and just leave it there statically. So it doesn't quite deliver the same experience. So if that is an important piece to your puzzle, then it's important to pick the camera that can, put people at that same size.
And there are also upcoming platform enhancements. If you stick with Zoom for a minute, they partner with certain manufacturers, and one of the roadmap features coming out is called the symmetry that picks out multiple people in a conference room and puts them first off in the roadmap. They're going to put them all in a single box, but ultimately their goal is to have each participant in a single conference room, a Zoom room, with one join into that Zoom call in their own box to give them that equity. It's not out yet, but that's a coming roadmap and feature. So part of the conversation is, are you happy with what can be delivered today, or do you continually want to wait forever? And you can't honestly wait forever, else you'll never buy.
And some of the considerations with that last point too is just the overall quality of the camera, and making sure that that platform has a high resolution of a camera, so that if it is going to call out each individual person and frame them individually and then zoom them, you just want to make sure that the technology can support, so that the visual aspect of it is actually going to be also part of a good user experience as well.
Great. Next question's associated with platforms. I think you might have addressed it a bit after it was submitted, but the question is, challenge is not only what the organization decides to use, but what the clients demand to use. For example, we use Zoom, but some clients will refuse to use Zoom. How do you best manage against that type of multiple platform requirements in the room systems?
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, it's kind of the question we get all the time now. What I find that I'm telling people is that if you have a platform that you're using internally, you're using the good majority of the time, that you go with that room system. but then you have a hybrid approach. So we can deliver a room system and deliver an element of BYOD so that on the 20% of the times where you're not using whatever platform you chose, you can bring in a laptop, you can plug in your device, and then you can join whatever the other people have sent you for an invite. So whether you're a Zoom house and then somebody sends you a GoToMeeting invite or a Google, you can join it using that UC device. So what we're finding is the hybrid approach seems to kind of fill those gaps.
And there's a difference between I want the ability to use BYOD with any platform versus, hey, we use Zoom 80% of the time and Teams 20% of the time. So that's when we think about interoperability so that maybe you deploy a Zoom room that can join your Teams calls.
All right, great. Next question. It came from a partner of ours based in India. Have you seen a dominance in the recent months from MS Teams as a preference in enterprise and education? Over Zoom, over WebEx, question mark.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer to that question is no, not necessarily. I've seen some very large enterprises move over to Zoom in lieu of, say, Teams, even if they've got, the Teams ecosystem, already currently working for them. And I think there's a lot of things that are necessarily driving that decision. Like Jonathan was saying earlier, user adoption, I think, is an important part of that. And over the course of the last year, everybody, for the most part, has had a crash course in utilizing Zoom as a platform. So, when you have a company that has thousands of employees that all of a sudden have to learn how to do video conferencing from home, and they all get used to using Zoom, for instance, everybody's getting their own Zoom accounts, then that can become very much a driving factor in terms of maintaining a certain level of productivity and just consistency when people are actually moving back into the work environment. You can imagine that everybody had to learn a new system. Everybody had to learn Teams or something different other than Zoom, if that's what they were using. That would just take a lot of time. It'd be a lot of training. It'd be a lot in terms of resources. So it's really dependent. I have seen some houses that have moved completely to a Teams environment. I think that has a lot to do with some of the backend features that are available in Teams. For instance, with Teams, you have Stream. So a lot of companies like the ability to have their calls and have all that stuff archived, and essentially what's a digital asset management system, so people can go back and reference those calls or reference those meetings and their notes and so on and so forth. So that the Microsoft ecosystem does a really good job of helping the back end and all the the media and the content that's being acquired, making that accessible to end users as well. So I would say the answer to that question is not necessarily. It kind of really depends upon the specific enterprise and how they've been working.
And my quick answer, when it comes to education, from my experience, I have not seen Microsoft Teams in education. I've seen primarily Zoom at the university level and often Google at the K through 12 level.
And higher ed for me, what I've seen, one of the most successful deployments is putting an actual Cisco room system in every room, and then just using licensing to connect into Teams and Zoom. And through licensing, it's still single click to join. And so they're basically telling anybody in their organization, Teams, Zoom, or WebEx will support all three single click. And they've actually done a very successful deployment. So that's one of the things I've been seeing.
Cool. Another, I think this one is tied into one of the last slide topics. Are clients looking for a command center across the enterprise for help desk, ticketing, VC utilization reporting, etc.? How prevalent have Crestron's XIO/Utelligy, etc. been faring in your opinion?
I mean, I'll jump in and say it's absolutely being deployed company-wide, but not in the command center environment. That's the point. These things are cloud-based. Your support staff could be in multiple locations. Why do we have to pigeonhole it into one area just to deliver larger televisions? We're talking about software-based platforms, people working from home. So your IT manager might be working from home, so they have to be able to access these same things. So to me, the most important thing is to make sure these management tools are cloud-based and accessible by multiple people in multiple locations.
I think from the largest enterprise answer, they are all on the path if they're not there already, because it's essential part of the delivery mechanism now, because you can't have 1,000 rooms with no management system. And we've been using both Crestron XIO and Utology, and they're different offerings that both work very, very well. And part of this is hardware selection. So if you're entirely Crestron, XIO is perfect. If you don't use any Crestron hardware, Utology is going to be the answer for you. But all the little houses that have tens of conference rooms may not know that they need to be asking this question yet. So that's why it's our responsibility to bring this up as part of the conversation.
All right, next one. Are dual screens almost used everywhere? I mean, over 90% of the rooms, question mark.
I say no.
Yeah, I concur. I would say no.
It's people have to understand that going with two screens doesn't make your text any more readable. So if you only have a fixed amount of space, I would absolutely prefer and tell people, if you can just fit either one 86-inch screen or two 55-inch screens, I'm going to tell them 186, because the bottom line is when you're sharing content, it's about the image size of the one screen.
Right.
That's the most important piece. Doesn't mean we don't see dual screen scenarios, but you have to make sure you can support the room and text readability when you're doing that.
And I think one of the deterrents in the past may have been just the price of displays. The price of for an 86 or 84-inch display has come down significantly. So, I completely concur with what Jonathan is saying, is that bigger is better in this case, definitely, when it comes
Although
to.
we've done some cool custom direct view LED where we did one big wide custom LED where they could do different imaging. So they could do a center only image if it was more presentation based, or they could do two side by side to do more of a people plus content. So there's some room for some fun in there if you have some budget and you have some creativity.
All right, next question. I think this may be more of a statement, but I wanted to see if anybody wanted to have any comments. Occupancy was a topic for office leaders pre-COVID. There was always the need to know how the office is being utilized, how to create digital solutions to utilize office space most effectively, etc. Therefore, a larger lens may be required when considering digital solutions that will help leaders manage occupancy and extract value from its insights. Agree? Any comment?
Yes.
Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier, just in terms of that being something that helps to drive decisions, at the top in terms of, space utilization. He or she is absolutely right. This is not something that just came up over the course of the last year with regards to occupancy and people counting and so forth. I think it definitely was something that became heightened just because people wanted to know how many people are in a room due to social distancing and trying to just, be more careful with the pandemic and so forth. But yeah, you're absolutely right. This is not something new, but it's something that I think it just needs to be revisited and have a conversation around, particularly as you start to look at some of these asset management systems up more close. And a lot of them have had some advancements over the course of the past couple of years. And particularly the cloud-based model being one of them, and moving from an on-prem system and going completely off-prem, going into the cloud. So it's more of a revisit of some things that definitely have been happening before the pandemic.
Just a quick note, the data has been there for years. It just sometimes it becomes so much data that you don't even know what to do with it. So if you want to really understand what your office environment is like, it has to be someone's job is to evaluate and look at that data, and whether that's that gets outsourced to another organization or whether that somebody gets hired within the organization. The data is there, the metrics are there. It's just a matter of looking at it, understanding the trends, and then moving forward into what you're doing in your next phase.
All right, we're coming up on the top of the hour. The couple questions that are left, we'll follow up with you directory. Thank you very much for the submissions. Also want to thank you, Akeem, Jonathan, and special thanks to you, Ben. Really appreciate all your time and insight today. I also want to thank everyone who was able to join us, and we hope you found the first in our 3-part hybrid workplace webinar series valuable. Our next webinar in the series will be focused on enabling greater collaboration, and we'll be excited to hear from our manufacturing partners during that one. The recorded replay will be available next week, and we'll share the recording with attendees when we have it posted. This and all our previous webinars will be available for viewing on our YouTube channel. If you have any follow-up questions or would like to schedule a personal discussion, please feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day and please stay healthy. Take care.